Alan from India, and thank you for being up so late in the evening for you. Uh,
You're
Actually,
welcome.
early morning, so I think good morning suits both of us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, and congratulations on the conference.
And so this Twangout is actually not just limited to the conference, it's also being seen by people in the whole HR community on Twitter. So to start off with, why don't you tell us about Constellation and what you do, and we'll then.
Sure. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alan Lipovsky. I am physically in Toronto, Ontario right now, and as we mentioned, it's about 2:30 a.m. So, I'm a research analyst at Constellation Research, which is headquartered in California. My area of research is, generically what we call the future of work. And what that focuses on, or what I focus on, is the best ways for people to collaborate together. So I focus on the technology, culture, and the
Alan,
business. Yep.
we just started the live broadcast, so if you could reintroduce yourself and
Start
Constellation.
over?
Yes.
Okay, I will start over for all of you that are live on the web watching. Hello, everyone live on the web watching. My name is Alan Lipovsky. I'm Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Constellation is headquartered in California. I'm physically in Toronto, Ontario. My research area covers the culture, technology, and business processes around how people can do their jobs more collaboratively. So I focus on collaboration technologies, how people can work together to get their jobs done. Can you hear me okay?
So, Alan, in 5 minutes, can you tell us about what you're seeing happening on the area of your research?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
I said, in 5 minutes, can you tell us your specific what you're seeing happening around the world and specifically in Asia Pacific?
So everyone must be watching at the screen and wondering
Very
what's
loud.
happening. This
Hi,
is the
okay,
part
so
of the
sure.
story
So
that we
the
find
big
out when
trends that
things
we're seeing
happen.
happen right
But
now
I want to know what
around
will we discuss
collaboration
about the global
is that
working trends
collaboration
in
is
industries
no
and
longer
technology and
just
how
sort of a
futures work will
standalone
look
feature.
like.
So where the
For
last
this,
3 to 5 years,
and
as
join
people have been
us. And
focusing
I
on
request
ways
you to
to
actually stick with
move
us.
away from email or improve their email, and companies are trying to get more social, and everyone talks about social business. The trend we're seeing right now is instead of using standalone social tools, we're seeing companies figure out how they can enhance the way they sell, the way they market, the way they do HR onboarding and succession planning, the way they do customer service, all of those different aspects of their company. How can you add social elements to that? How, instead of changing the way people do things, how can you improve the processes that already exist today? So customers are coming to us sort of looking for that digital business transformation, where a few years ago the question was, how do I become a social business? Now the question isn't, how do I become a social business? That's a given. Everyone knows you have to be a social business. The question is, how do we transform what we're doing today to be more social? And I think that's a very significant change from just a few years ago. Are you seeing similar types of things?
So specifically, any trends that are unique to say the Asia Pacific market that you're seeing, Alan?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, I said
Now I can.
any specific trends that you're looking and in the Asia Pacific region that's different from, say, Europe and US?
Sure. So one of the biggest trends that's occurring in this shift for social, like what's causing more adoption and better use of the tools these days, it's cliche to say, but it's obviously mobile. So we're seeing that people want to have access to their colleagues, their content, the communities they belong to. I call it the 3Cs. So colleagues, content, and communities. Anytime, anywhere. They want it to be accessible on mobile devices. They want to be able to not just read things that they're doing, but they want to be able to interact with the content, where a few years ago it was like mobile was great to be able to see things. Now they have to be able to directly interact. They have to be able to tell their peers that they're doing a good job. They have to assign tasks. They have to be able to do performance reviews. They have to be able to locate experts. All of the different things that sort of happen around, the human aspect of business has to happen via mobile. Or you're just 2 years behind. So certainly mobile is a huge, huge trend. But I want to be very clear on something. Mobile does not just mean phone or tablets. Everyone thinks mobile and they immediately think about this device. So mobile is more a culture. Mobile means anytime I'm away from my kind of set office environment. Mobile could be something as simple as your laptop sitting at a coffee shop. That's still mobile. But it could be as complex as a touchscreen in your car or a wearable computer on your wrist. Mobile has a very different feeling these days than it did just a few years ago. Mobile could be a kiosk at your corporate headquarters, or mobile could be a complete glass desktop at the showroom of a manufacturing plant. So mobile simply means away from a traditional office environment, and I want to make sure everybody is aware of that.
Any organization that is making this transition well, can you share some examples when you're advising organizations? Which organizations are actually making this transition well?
Sure. Well, instead of specific organizations, let me talk about some industries that I think are doing this really well. So instead of getting into specific use cases, I think the industries that are starting to do social and mobile, and especially around the HR sort of front really well, are things like finance, which is interesting because finance you would think is one of those organizations that is highly regulated and slow to move. But the reason why is finance, banking, and stocks, and all these things. The key component of what they do is people related. Everything your bank does revolves around a client-customer relationship. So banks are doing a lot of research into how can we ensure that we make the best customer experience. Here in Canada, for example, TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank, using social and collaboration technologies, in this case it happens to be from IBM, but it could be from anybody, they moved themselves from third in customer service to first in customer service all around community. What they did is they made it much easier for people to be able to find the information they need, get answers to the questions they need, locate things like banking hours, interact with their tellers, do online banking. Like all of that is happening and giving people the access from mobile devices and collaborative environments, and that moved TD Bank from third to first. So it definitely is working. I also see a lot happening in the manufacturing space. So, again, not a traditional environment that you would think, but manufacturing involves lots of employees who do not have a dedicated desk. So there's hundreds or a high percentage of staff that are not office workers. So what manufacturing plants are doing is they are, for the first time, think of this from an HR standpoint. For the first time, giving all these factory workers the ability to have their voice be heard. So if they put an iPad on the floor in the manufacturing plant, all of a sudden these workers are able to access corporate intranets or corporate communities, fill out benefit enrollment paperwork that they used to do in paper because these people don't even have email addresses, a lot of them. A lot of these factory workers are not the traditional person like you or I who spends our days in front of our computer. These are people that are doing manual tasks for a living. So it's really interesting to see industries that you wouldn't expect to really improve their HR processes through mobile, through collaboration, etc. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing.
Let's talk about the money. In your view, is the HR department empowered or having budgets to spend on technology, or is it still coming from the CIO and HR just accepts whatever the thing is?
Well, that's a great question. And everybody, when they want to implement new technology, says, where do we get the financing for it? This is a great idea, Alan, but our company doesn't have money for it. And our CEO, Ray Wong, and I were talking about this actually earlier today. Of all the technologies that I've seen in the last 20 years, email comes in, chat clients come in, social software comes in. It's always been very departmental who gets to decide which one to choose. But for the first time, collaboration technology is something that is so universal across the company that it's not a departmental decision. So if you choose to go with a collaboration platform, that same platform supports sales, it supports marketing, it supports HR onboarding, it supports rewards and recognition, it supports customer service. So all of a sudden, collaboration is something that is spread across the entire company. And what that's done is it's given everybody an equal footing into making the decisions. It's not the IT department chose what email package we're using, and guess what? Everybody is going to use that same email package. Now, the chief marketing officer, the chief finance officer, the head of HR, the head of sales, all of these people are coming to the table and saying, we need to improve the way our employees collaborate. We need to improve the way we engage with our customers. And so companies are looking for one system across that. And that means the HR department doesn't have to fight for funding. They're able to sort of latch on to that process that's happening all across the company, which is fantastic because, one universal social by definition can't have different departmental solutions because then they're not going to talk to each other. In the past, sales used one tool, marketing used another tool, etc. Well, this decision for collaboration should be one tool across your company for use both internally and externally. So HR is just as important as sales and marketing, and I think that's fantastic.
Great. So let's talk about the other side. How are vendors ready for what organizations are demanding from them, or are they slow to innovate, or are there startups that are stealing the thunder, as in from the big guys? And how do you see the vendor market evolving?
That's a fantastic question, and no matter how I'm going to answer, some vendors are going to be happy with me and some are going to be mad at me. But as an analyst, this is my job, is to tell you my opinion. The way I look at the HR market, the collaboration market, the technology and culture of social business, is you have room for both. You have startups that are obviously smaller than the big IBM, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, Infor, some of the 5 big companies. You have dozens of startups, such as companies as yourself, who are building things faster in many ways than those companies are going to be able to do, and much more specific targeted features than the big companies are going to be able to do. So in the HR market, for example, I've come across a lot of vendors who are doing things very specific to, say, onboarding solutions, or reward and recognition solutions. Just this week, I've had conversations with 2 startups that are focused very specifically on the niche of peer reviews, so getting feedback about what's happening. Now, that's great for a very short period of time, but obviously then the Ceridians and Workdays and IBM Connexa are going to start to kind of build those things into features as the big core product. SAP with success factors, etc. So what the startups need to do is always be thinking sort of one step ahead. You don't want to put all of your company on one specific feature. You want to look at, we're going to partner with SAP or we're going to partner with IBM, and we're going to build an add-on to their collaboration platform or their human resources platform, and we're going to fill in the gaps of what they're not traditionally making. This is the way we've seen business partners work for decades. For example, in the Microsoft world, Microsoft will build SharePoint, but then thousands of partners will build things that SharePoint doesn't do. 2 or 3 years later, SharePoint may start doing those features. So then the startups have to do what comes next. And any startup that doesn't think there's always going to be something coming next is a startup that you should probably avoid. People say, well, if we're building this, we don't want to get put out of business by the big guys. Well, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of social networking. 1 year ago, we wouldn't have thought about wearable computing. 2 years from now, we're not going to think about holographic computing. Startups always have to be doing things faster than the big enterprise software companies are going to be doing. So there's lots of room for both, and where I think the secret is integration. Startups shouldn't be trying to do something that doesn't integrate with Oracle, SAP, IBM, Microsoft. Oracle, SAP, Microsoft shouldn't be building a platform that isn't extensible to partners. So I think both have to work together. Startups have to plan to work with the big guys, and the big guys have to be platforms knowing that the startups are going to add features to them. Make sense?
Sounds good. So
okay.
A question which will be of interest to the HR community much more is, how do you think it will change tomorrow's employees? As in,
Absolutely, that's a great question. So let's not talk about technology. Let's talk about the employees, right? So I hear a lot of questions around millennial employees. We get all these questions about how is a 20-year-old employee different than a 40-year-old employee, a 50-year-old employee. And to be honest with you, 10 years ago, I think that was a very valid question. I think 10 years ago, the 20-year-olds were much more technology savvy than 30, 40, 50-year-olds. Fast forward to today, a 20-year-old employee, technology-wise, isn't that significantly different than a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old employee. Why? Because we're all sort of evening our access to technology. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Guess what? That's all being used by 30, 40, 50, even 60-year-olds, where everyone says, 20-year-olds like text messaging. Well, guess what? I know a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds that do text messaging as well. So when we think about what employees need, at Constellation, what we talk about is this concept called digital proficiency. And digital proficiency isn't based on what your age is. It doesn't matter if you were born in 1960, 1970, or 1980, or even the 1990s, I guess, are employees now, 20-year-olds are born in the 90s. Digital proficiency is based on how skilled you are with technology and how comfortable you are with technology. And you combine those two attributes, skill level and comfort level, and guess what? A 50-year-old programmer who has been building things for 30 years is going to be more skilled than a 20-year-old. But they may not be as comfortable with this new social networking, sharing, openness, and transparency. So if you put the 50-year-old together with the 20-year-old, all of a sudden you're going to have someone who knows all the new technology, plus someone who has a lot of experience, has, understands the industry, understands the changes that have occurred, understands the customer requirements. So we really feel that it shouldn't be thinking about your employees, new employees. We feel you should be thinking about your entire employee base and planning your succession planning, your onboarding tools, your collaboration tools based on the skill and comfort level of people, not what age they are. So I know that was very fast explanation of it, but I hope that answers the question.
Related to that, do you think organizations need to invest time in actually building this proficiency of their employees?
Building the efficiency, building the which part of their employees?
Proficiency, the digital
The
proficiency.
proficiency. Absolutely. So again, proficiency is made up of skill and comfort. So what should organizations do to improve both skill and comfort? So let's start with the first one, skill. Of course, there's old-fashioned things like formal training. So you can have video training, you can have cards on the desk that say here's how you use something. But in this collaborative world, it's the informal training that is making much more of an impact. If you put the tools out there and you let people start sharing, asking questions, sharing best practices, creating communities where they can get information from each other. You at the start of before the call went live, you and I were talking about our mutual friend Samir Patel and some of the things that, for example, SAP is doing with Jam around informal learning. And Jam, just like Jive or Yammer or Tibber or any of these other social networks, the beauty of a social network is the informal learning where people can ask questions, they can share videos, etc. So I think organizations need to invest in making sure their employees, as well as their customers, have a community, have an open forum, have a tool that supports questions and answers.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Holger's just joined the chat.
Wonderful. Hello,
Yes,
Holger.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for being late. Massive flight delay. Just landed. I'm still at the airport, as you can see. Just walked off my plane.
Hi, Holger. Well, thank you for joining us. We're talking about what organizations should be doing to sort of improve the skill level and the comfort level of their employees related to collaboration and HR technology and sharing and all of these great things. So why don't I pause for a minute and now that you've joined us, maybe we can go back for a second, and Holger, you can talk about what trends you're seeing in the collaboration space related to HR.
Before that, Holger, just two lines about what you do at Constellation and what are the areas you focus on for our audience.
Yeah, happy to. So I cover together with Alan, Future of Work. Helen, I'm always joking, does all the fun stuff, the collaboration, the social stuff. I do the boring stuff, the stuff which goes into databases. So things like payroll, compliance, or also maybe for fun stuff like talent management, right? So we both work together on that. Simple differentiations. If it goes in database, usually I'm more involved in it. If it's nice and sexy and fluffy, then it's Alan's stuff.
Yeah, but your stuff leads to real business results.
Hopefully, not always. Yeah, but no, if payroll doesn't work, people are in trouble. Yeah, that's correct.
So, Holger, a specific question I asked Alan, but I think in the HR tech industry, what are the trends that you're seeing specifically in the Asia Pacific market that are different from the, say, the US and UK market or Europe market? Is there anything specific trends in the HR technology space that are relevant to more Asia Pacific that is different from the other markets?
Yeah, if I understood right, you were asking for Asia Pacific markets. There's an announcement happening on your side, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Chaotic place out here.
Yeah. No. So the important things, I mean, one of the things Asia Pacific generally struggles with is fast internet access, as you guys know firsthand. That's something where more has to be done to enable many of the SaaS solutions, right? So we see still a lot of on-premise implementations happening because of bandwidth issues across Asia Pac, right? Depending on the countries. But as you know, vendors are experienced that many of the SaaS vendors who come from the US realize it's not just enough for all of Asia Pac to have one data center to host a SaaS application, but they usually have to have something in China, something in Singapore, something in India, something in Australia, something in Japan, right? So it's a much, much bigger investment. Like many people who travel for the first time there realize how big Asia Pac is, right? And there's a big focus, of course, because of the dynamic economies on the recruiting side inside of Asia Pac, because companies are ramping up much more dynamically. And there's a huge demand for for keeping that talent on board, training people, and doing the right performance management of them. Yeah, so there's a number of local players equally. Australia has its own HR market for itself, as an example. Japan has its own HR market for itself. China has its own HR market. So you don't have the usual vendors like you see in the US and North America being the big players there.
And and I asked Alan this also. How's the money? As in, do do organizations in Asia Pacific agree to spend as much money on the HR tech area, or is there a challenge for vendors to, or a pressure for vendors to kind of discount or kind of give it?
Well, there's smart companies will always negotiate discounts, right? So there's a growing realization in North America and Europe that your HR systems have to be good, because for most enterprise, employees are the biggest expense. And if you manage the expense correctly, I don't know if you guys talked about I have the most gray hair from the three of us, right? The silver tsunami happening. In many parts of the world, the workforce are retiring, right? The US has 50% of people retiring in the next 10 years. That's significant challenges, right? Differently challenged in Asia Pac, which are younger economies, growing economies, where there's no aging population in that sense. But smart companies will negotiate good deals in that perspective. And equally in Asia Pac, the importance of HR is rising. Right? It becomes a more important expense for companies there too.
Great. I think it's. Let me check if there are questions on Twitter for both of you. I know it's very late, and our thanks again for joining in. Let me.
No problem.
And Olga, thank you for joining in from the airport.
Well, thanks for having us.
While we're waiting on one of those questions, one of the things I can kind of finish off that we were talking about, Gunthem, about the importance of where HR collaboration tools fit in and fit together. We talked briefly about the belief that these tools can't be standalone. If you think how work has changed, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, maybe today for some companies, you never thought as a general employee about HR software. HR software, as Holger mentioned earlier, was payroll. Everybody wanted to get paid. Everyone wants to get their benefits and things. But the HR department was always thought of as, an operations department that was behind the scenes. One of the things we see changing is now that collaboration technologies and openness and transparency and being social, HR is such a key play in that, because it's things like employee onboarding, where all of a sudden, instead of employee onboarding meant, you went to an office somewhere in the basement, you got your badge, they buddied you up with one employee who showed you around the office. Now HR onboarding is done inside your company's social networks, and you're added to a new employee community. And you may, if you're using, a certain phone or a certain computer, be added to a community where you can learn about that. And, things like being introduced to the company and people saying, oh, here's a new expert, being added to the corporate directory. You have this beautiful profile now, where in the past nobody looked at the company directory, the LDAP directory or company active directory. In the past, the directory was just something your email system used to figure out an email address. But now the company directory is this big, beautiful catalog of employees that lists your skills, that lists your hierarchy of who you work with, that lists your achievements, that lists the rewards you've done. So all sorts of aspects, from onboarding to recognition to task management to expertise location, all of these things are happening now inside the collaboration tools. And I think that has elevated functions of HR that nobody ever used to think about. And I think that's a really interesting trend when you asked me earlier about what the trends are.
Okay, so
So certainly agree with what Alan just said. HR is becoming much more strategic and relevant because more expense on the workforce side, lots of replacement issues, retirement issues, training issues on the workforce side. And I think you might have touched digital business already, as usually it comes up very quickly in this conversations. There's a huge demand to have employees more qualified and understand different areas of the enterprise. So the typically very vertically focused career perspective becomes a much more horizontal career perspective, where it's important to have employees who work in different functions, different departments of the enterprise to help in the transformation to become more agile, become more digital business. So HR is becoming, luckily for all of us, much more strategic again.
Great. So one question, it wasn't on Twitter, but it's being raised is privacy concerns of employees. As we share more and become more open inside the workplace, is there, will some employees feel there's danger of employers tracking their behavior, even in internal social networks? So this guy keeps asking about this area, that means his skills are not up to this area. And so are there would employees have privacy concerns that employers are now know much more about them, thanks to all these conversations happening in the workplace?
You want to start with that, Holger? You want me to dive in?
No, I'm happy to. I can start. I mean, privacy concerns are always a problem, right? And then there's a double-edged perspective on that, right? On one side, employees should always be concerned what's happening on privacy side and regulation, and employers will always have the interest to go potentially beyond the legal aspect, which is a bad thing to do. On the flip side, with social networks being used in the private side, employees much more comfortable of sharing things, and the younger generation, the so-called millennials, are even expecting that they bring, for instance, their social network, and as naturally it's part of what the company can leverage, right? And it's also changing as a criteria, right? As companies might employ someone who speaks a certain language and expect that certain language to be used in their profession, in their job, because they hired that person for knowing that language, right? Similarly, companies might hire people which bring a certain social network, certain social influence with them on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on to use at their work, right? So it's going to become in some areas already, like in the social media side, it's becoming a feature, a capability. So I think it's going both directions, less privacy concerns, and the other side, lots of interest of knowing more about the employee. We know all these stories about companies letting people go because of indecent or inappropriate behavior on social networks, which they can't combine with corporate culture and so on.
Thanks, folks. I just realized we're almost out of time, and I know it's very late for both of you also. And this video will be up on YouTube and the People Matters website. We'll share it, the link to the website soon. Thank you, Alan. It's like, I know,
you're very welcome. Have a great conference, and we'll see you there live next year.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Holger, for
Thanks for having us. Greetings to San Diego, and have a great conference, and looking forward to being in here soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.